Hello. You've just caught me doing a bit of research. My other interest, in addition to photography, is classical music. And this all started when I was a teenager at youth club, when a youth leader played a recording of In the Hall of the Mountain King from Peer Gynt. So that Christmas, I asked for a recording from my parents of Peter Gynt, not Peer Gynt, but I did end up with the right tune. Since then, I've developed a passionate interest, particularly in English music. And with the help of this map, I'm going to visit my cousin in Kidderminster, and he's going to take me around the county next week, seeking out the places associated with the composer Sir Edward Elgar, which I'm greatly looking forward to. So by the time you've seen this trailer, it's probably all done. So let's have a look at it, shall we? There is music in the air, music all around us. Sometimes a melody enters the soul. We sing it and recognize the words, but we don't know where it came from and why it is universally famous. Land of Hope and Glory is such a tune, and sung each year at the last night of the proms. It is the central melody of Pomp and Circumstance March No. 1 by the English composer Sir Edward Elgar, and often performed on its own as a patriotic anthem. Elgar had that rare insight that he had composed a hit tune, and 'twas the King, Edward VII, who suggested that words should be added, and, as predicted, it went around the world. Outside music circles, Elgar is perhaps the best-known English composer. He was widely decorated. There is a statue honouring his name in Worcester and a memorial window inside the cathedral. But his beginnings were humble, and success was not easy. He was born in a tiny cottage at Lower Broadheath, a couple of miles west of Worcester, and within sight of the Malvern Hills, which played such an inspirational part in his music. The cottage is preserved for posterity and is now a museum. It is managed by the National Trust, so let's take a peek, but look carefully, and you might spot Elgar keeping an eye on things. Of all the landscapes that inspired Elgar's music, the Malvern Hills come top of the list. He even wrote a cantata about them. It is called Caractacus, about the British chieftain who made his last stand against the Romans at the British camp, now historically inaccurate. This is what I hear all day. The trees are singing my music, or have I sung theirs? I suppose I have. Location was important for Elgar's muse. He believed that much of his music came from the landscape. Caractacus was composed at his woodland retreat of Birchwood Lodge, north of the Malvern Hills, which he rented for 6 years. As well as the Triumphal March, the Woodland Interlude also found life as a separate concert piece. The Elgars were not used to seaside holidays. Landlocked Worcestershire did not offer many opportunities for the dipping of the feet in the briny. When Edward married Caroline Alice in 1889, because of its Mediterranean climate, they spent their honeymoon at Ventnor on the Isle of Wight. They went by coach to Freshwater and were struck by its dramatic coastal scenery of rock arches and caves. It is thought that this early encounter with the sea provided the germinal inspiration for Sea Pictures, composed 10 years later, settings of 5 poems for contralto and orchestra. Roden Noah's poem Sea Slumber Song was inspired by Kynan's Cove in Cornwall and comes first in the cycle. The Enigma variations are musical portraits of his friends, inner landscapes of Elgar's psyche, but Nimrod has acquired his own life over the years. Often played at acts of remembrance, it has become, along with Land of Hope and Glory, one of Elgar's best-known melodies. Elgar's spiritual home was Worcester and the Malverns, but London was the land of plenty, particularly as his fame grew, which provincial life in Worcestershire couldn't supply. The Philharmonic Society of London commissioned a new work, so Elgar composed an overture about the capital. He called it Cockaigne. In medieval myth, Cockaigne is a land of plenty, and the printer's score had a specially designed cover reflecting the confident and optimistic side of London which his music portrays. Before moving to Hampstead, he lived for a time on the outskirts of Hereford, where he composed some of his finest works, including the 2 symphonies. Visiting a valley through which the Wye flowed, he heard a song that reminded him of one heard in Cardiganshire, which later he included in his Introduction and Allegro for Strings. Elgar once remarked that his heart was always in that sweet borderland where I have made my home. A favourite location was Modiford Bridge, east of Hereford, near the confluence of the rivers Lug and Wye, an area that inspired the violin concerto. When rehearsing the First Symphony with the London Symphony Orchestra, Elgar told them to play a passage like "Something You Hear Down by the River." 7 House, Hampstead was a fitting residence for Elgar. He was now a knight of the realm, and had also received the highest accolade that a nation could bestow, the Order of Merit, which can only be held by 24 living recipients. His works included The Music Makers and Crown of India, but he was suffering from depression and tired of London life during World War I. His wife came to the rescue. Salvation was found in the remote Sussex countryside, an isolated cottage set in woodland down a rough country lane, with commanding views of the South Downs and Chanctonbury Ring. This was Brinkwells, near Fittleworth, which the Elgars leased for the duration of the war until 1921. Here Edward found the peace and quiet that his soul required. Soon he was busy composing chamber music. Elgar was captivated by a local legend involving Spanish monks carrying out wicked acts who were struck by lightning and turned into trees for their sins. A strange story that found its way into the second movement of his piano quintet. One final work arose from his period at Brinkwells, the Cello Concerto, which today is one of the most widely performed works for this instrument. Elgar's wife died from lung cancer in April 1920, and it is possible that the sadness and bitterness of the concerto reflects his deep personal loss. The loss of Caroline Alice had dampened his muse. A third symphony was anticipated, and although sketches exist, he never lived to complete it. He held a wish for his ashes to be scattered at the confluence of the Teme and the Severn south of Worcester, but his wishes were never carried out. Elgar died February 1934, and he was buried at St Wolstan's Catholic Church at Little Morven alongside Alice. as he lay dying, he whistled to a friend the main theme from the first movement of his cello concerto and said, "If you are ever walking on the Malvern Hills and hear someone whistling this tune, don't be frightened, it's only me."